Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to a very special edition of Breaking News of this Saturday. It's the 26th day of October, 2024, and it was about 12 hours ago that we got the news that Israel had attacked Iran. It was about 5 o'clock Pacific time when it came over the wire. It's about 4:30 in the morning right now here in the west coast of the United States. And one of our problems is the lack of information we're getting, and that's why we didn't do a special breaking news last night, because it was the beginning of the Sabbath, the Shabbat, about 2 a.m. when this took place, and the news sites were down. They weren't saying anything. You just got the bare headlines, as it were. So we thought it best to wait till this morning to give you the latest. So what we've got is two stories we're going to do and kind of give you an update of what's gone on so far. We really won't know a whole lot more until the Sabbath is over. That's about, oh, let's see, it's like in 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 2:30 in the afternoon in Israel. That's about 5.5 hours from now. And so we'll then get some official word in that when once the Sabbath is over, and the news sites will go back up and they'll start interviewing people from both sides of the aisle there in Israel to kind of get the latest of what they think. And so we'll give you what we know right now, and we will probably come back later this afternoon and do a second edition of breaking news, probably about 2 o'clock or so Pacific time, when we know a lot more. But we have some things to share with you, and there's quite a lot to say right now, what we do know, but there's still a lot we don't know. So that's what we're going to do. Okay. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, in our headlines declares mission accomplished following the Iran strikes. This is from YNET News. That was one of the sites that was up. And then Jerusalem Post has an article, the key takeaways from Israel's strike on Iran, and an analysis. So that's the two stories we're going to do. Again, since this happened during the wee hours of the night after the beginning of the Shabbat, the Sabbath, we have limited information, and we'll probably end up now with more questions than answers. But it seems from Israel's perspective, this is it for now. And so the real issue is, will Iran respond to what they did? And that's what we just don't know. And that's what we're going to wait and see. So let's summarize what we do know, and this will bring you up to date as far as we're concerned for now. The first headline is the IDF declares mission accomplished following Iran strikes. Again, this is from YNET, one of the Israeli sites. The military says all aircraft returned safely after a 3-hour strike on Iranian targets, reportedly aimed at missile production facilities, surface-to-air missile systems, and other area capabilities. The IDF warns Tehran against any retaliatory action. So it was a 3-hour airstrike early Saturday, 25 days after Tehran's October 1st ballistic and missile attack on Israel. The IDF announced that all aircraft had returned safely to the base following the operation, reportedly targeted about 20 different sites, according to the leftist New York Times. The strike was concluded in response to recent attacks by the Iranian regime against Israel and its citizens, the IDF said in a statement, adding that the retaliatory strike has been completed and the mission is fulfilled. So it seems from Israel's perspective, here's what we know, this is it. This is all they're going to do. IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari underscored Israel's resolve to defend itself, warning that Israel would respond if Iran continued to escalate the violence in the region. According to the IDF, Israeli Air Force planes targeted missile production sites, surface-to-air missiles arrays, and other Iranian aerial assets intended to limit Israel's operational freedom, avoiding attacks on sites that could provoke a broader war. And that's kind of the key takeaway. They did avoid that. Israel focused on non-nuclear military targets, excluding Iran's oil and nuclear facilities. They didn't hit either. Military sources say dozens of Israeli aircraft carried out the strikes across multiple areas in Iran, roughly 1,600 kilometers or 1,000 miles from Israeli borders. The extent of the damage will become clear later, but Israel now has greater operational freedom, sources noted, adding that additional targets remain for potential future strikes. We remain fully prepared for defense and offense, with no change to public safety guidelines on the home front, the sources said, highlighting Israel's focus on fighting in Gaza and Lebanon amidst Iran's push for regional escalation. Our reach across the Middle East has been demonstrated. So that's the first article from the YNET News Service, kind of giving an assessment, mission accomplished, as it were. Now, Again, the fighting still goes on in Lebanon. There have been a number of the red alerts. If you got the red alert app, you know what I'm talking about. Red alert Israel. Whenever there's a missile coming over, a drone or something into Israel from Lebanon or wherever, you get an alert there, it goes off. And so that's been continuing. But Iran has been silent. And so we're going to look now at the Jerusalem Post. I thought this was the best way to do it because of our limited information. They had a really good article called The Key Takeaways from Israel's Strike on Iran and an Analysis. Now, what's interesting, the first headline, they got the first sentence after the headline. Iran now feels Iran now feels it can launch ballistic missiles at Israel whenever it wants. And this is what's going to be part of the problem, I imagine, a few hours from now, when everyone starts talking to the press. Okay, Israel carried out long-awaited airstrikes on Iran on Friday night on precise and targeted military targets. They were aimed at thwarting immediate threats to the state of Israel, the IDF said. Despite the much anticipated attack, Israel reported they finished the attack before the sun rose in Tehran. The strikes were designed to retaliate for Israel's ballistic missiles attacks on Iran on October 1st. Suppressing the truth? Question mark. Tehran threatens prison time for anyone sharing the evidence of Israeli strikes. So, what are the developments since the strikes? What can the strikes tell us about the new situation in the region? So there's a number of takeaways here. We'll just hit, the the headlines on this. And again, this is preliminary information we have, so we'll give you what we've got. The first point is Iran is downplaying the strikes. Remember, we talked about this yesterday. Iran said, look, if the strikes aren't that difficult, we won't respond. We'll call it a day and that's it. And it seems that's what they're doing right now. They're downplaying the strikes of how bad they were. Iranian state media overnight portrayed the country as unaffected by the attacks. Pro-Iran Telegram channels put up videos of people on the roof of a building mocking the Israeli attack. One statement noted that while Israelis run for shelter where there are rockets, the Iranians made tea and sit at home as if all is normal. The reason for this is Iran didn't set off any sirens in most cities, unlike Israel. In the morning, Iranian state media showed more normalcy in Tehran. Videos showed people driving around and going about their normal morning exercises. This illustrated that Iran is trying to show it is not affected by the strikes. It wants to show it can safeguard civilian life amidst the tensions. It wants to contrast this with Israel, where Iran's attack with 180 ballistic missiles forced the entire country of Israel to go into shelters for almost an hour on October 1st. So that's one takeaway. Iran is downplaying it. The second takeaway, Israel showcases the ability or the capability of long-range strikes. Israel's successful strikes on Iran showcase the country's long-range military capabilities after many years of preparation. The same attacks displayed by Israel last night were also carried out during long-range strikes targeting the Houthis to retaliate against their attacks. We've talked about that. The strikes on the Houthis involved numerous aircraft, F-15s, F-35s, and the strikes were carried out over several hours. So we see the same thing here. Israel had real-world experience carrying out these long-range operations. The Houthi strikes were just practice for this Tehran attack. The strike on Iran are a message from Israel, and this is kind of their takeaway, that Israel can carry out these types of operations. Iran should be put on notice that Israel has many types of capabilities using advanced weaponry that can be used in the future, showing the strikes were a wider message. A third takeaway, U.S.-Israeli cooperation is on display. It is likely that the U.S. backing of Israel by deploying the THAAD air defense system and also deploying other air assets to the region was important in underscoring how U.S.-Israel cooperation in the lead up to the strikes on Iran. Okay, Israel informed the U.S. prior to the strikes, a change from Israeli operations in the past. The cooperation this time is important because Israel has been part of the U.S. Central Command over the past several years. Israel, the U.S., and other partner countries have coordinated during the Iranian attacks on Israel in April and October. The U.S. Central Command is an important component of stability in the region. And so, bottom line is, this is something that was done in accordance with the U.S. They talked it over. And I guess they got the green light from Biden, Lloyd Austin, the rest, Blinken from U.S. that here's what we'll do. We'll attack these military sites. That's it. We won't hit their nuclear sites. We won't hit the oil fields. We'll hit sites that will do damage to their missile system and other components. And we'll show them we could do a lot more. but we'll end it at that this time. So that seems now what's going on. Now, here's an interesting question this article asks. Will this become the new normal? The two Iranian strikes on Israel and Israel's retaliation on October 26 now show that direct confrontation between Iran and Israel is becoming more normal. The proverbial seal is broken, and there may be more of these attacks. It could become the new normal in the region. The taboo of direct strikes is now gone, and both countries now think they can manage this conflict. Instead of strikes leading to World War III, as some commentators had suggested in the past, the countries are managing the conflict in a kind of escalatory understanding. In other words, and they say it's kind of a reminder of the Cold War with U.S. and Russia back and forth. However, U.S. and Russia never got into a real shooting war during the Cold War. The Iran-Israel Cold War could become more hot. This is largely Iran's fault, of course. Iran backed the October 7th attack from Hamas against Israel, moved its proxies like pawns to strike Israel, Hezbollah, of course, in the north, Hamas in the south, from 7 fronts, as we've talked about. So this is Iran's doing it. So Israel's been forced to respond. So here's the question. The question is whether Iran now thinks that it's winning and will carry out more attacks. Now you've got the usual suspects. The regional countries all condemned Israel for attacking. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman, they all came out. Egypt, Lebanon, they condemned Israel for attacking Iran. Interesting. So it's okay for Iran to attack Israel with 180 ballistic missiles, but if Israel responds, only hitting military sites, that's not okay. But this is not surprising at all. This is not helpful, as the article says, in terms of Israel's long-term goals of integrating with the region. No kidding. And becoming part of the arc of stability in the region. And of course, as we've talked about, that's never going to happen. Sign 7 of our 25 signs. We're near the end. There'll be a continual search for peace. Israel will never be at peace with these neighbors, never, until the Lord Jesus Christ comes back. But so none of this is surprising, even though Iran attack and the response of Israel from the attack from Saudis and others are probably very happy what Israel did to kind of tamp it down. And seemingly it's going to keep it quiet for a while. This seems to be the takeaway. Now, the big question is Iran deterred? In the wake of these airstrikes, it's going to be the key question about whether Iran is deterred or not. At the moment, Iran is trying to assert that it was not harmed by the attacks. If evidence emerges that Iran did suffer serious damage, it may want to respond. And of course, Israel will respond back and forth. On the other hand, it might be concerned that Israel could escalate. However, Iran's threats to appear have gotten the U.S. to caution Israel against stronger blows aimed at Tehran. Again, the U.S. talked Israel into not hitting as hard as they could have, or maybe they should have. That's obviously what happened this first time around. Now, again, we don't know what the future holds, as it were. Part of the problem, as we've mentioned before, the U.S. elections in less than 2 weeks, and they don't want to cause an issue here with the U.S. election with the Democratic administration in power. So Israel has kind of done a little easier attack than it probably would have had not the election been coming up. So the article goes on to say, on the other hand, it might be concerned, this is Iran, that Israel could escalate. Israel could certainly, do this. So in many ways, the 3 weeks of lead up to this attack meant it was not a surprise and gave everyone a chance to prepare for the messaging in advance. So that's the message. This kind of choreographed warfighting may serve American interests, but the question is how Iran reads this. It may read it as a victory because it rained down 180 missiles on Israel, and it received what it has claimed as a limited blow in return. Okay. Iran has also learned a lot from the 2 attacks on Israel. The fact that U.S. had to deploy the THAAD to Israel after the second attack may send a message to Iran that Israel's air defense systems are not capable of defending against a larger Iranian attack. In fact, we've got another interesting story. We'll see if we can do that, sneak it in on our next edition of Breaking News about how the drones have really affected Israel. They were surprised how they've gotten through the Israel defenses there, and they didn't realize the sophistication of them. So they're scrambling to try and find a way to make sure these drones, which can carry, quite a bit of ordnance bombs and that, getting through Israeli airspace. So we'll see. Anyway, so again, Iran has learned a lot from these 2 attacks. In the last paragraph, Iran now feels it can launch ballistic missiles at Israel whenever it wants. In the entire history of Israel, very few countries have ever carried out an attack inside Israel using missiles or warplanes. Egypt bombed Tel Aviv in the 1948 war. Saddam Hussein launched Scud missiles at Israel. However, Iran clearly feels it can terrorize Israel and get away with it. After the October 26 strikes, Iran is not displaying any kind of sense that it will climb down from these threats. So that's where we're at right now. And so we've given you the latest. And in a few hours, when the light of day comes, with respect, will be evening time. The Shabbat gets over about 8 o'clock, 7:30, 8 o'clock at night in Israel. And they're 10 hours ahead of us here. It's like I said, it's before 5 in the morning here in Southern Cal. We'll see what they say. We'll see what Iran says. And it looks like they may just say, okay, well, both sides will call it a day and go on. Iran will continue the threat against Israel and feel it can do this again sometime because seemingly the U.S. has caused it to not do what it may want to do or needs to do. We will have to wait and see. And I'm sure there'll be some voices in Israel that are not very happy that Israel didn't do more. So again, as always, what we have on our website, Educating Our World, is an explanation of 65 books, 12 books on Bible prophecy, of what will happen at the time of the end. The Bible goes into great detail telling us 25 signs are near the end. That's the one you want to download and get and look at because it kind of sets the tone for what's happening right now and what will happen in the future. So we know ahead of time what's all going to take place. So we're not surprised by any of this. But this is the latest, so we thought we'd give you this heads up now at this particular time as we wait to see what happens during the rest of this very interesting day, October 26, 2024. I'm Don Stewart. Thanks again for watching. We will see you again later on another edition of Breaking News Today. Until then, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.